welcome to my brand new podcast, Notions. I'm Antonia K. Moore, and today I'm going to be diving into a bit of Marilyn Monroe. This podcast pretty much is comedy based and also kind of just talks about stories, different events, different celebrities, things of interest, and all of that fun stuff. So, as I mentioned, today I'm going to be talking about Marilyn Monroe because I've literally been obsessed with Marilyn Monroe, like I think the majority of people have, since I was little. I think I was basically, how I discovered Marilyn Monroe was like I was a fan of Madonna, and then Madonna introduced me to Marilyn Monroe in a way, because literally Marilyn Monroe copied her idol, and then Madonna copied Marilyn Monroe. So I mean, if you actually, and it's only now I kind of see it, if you look at any of the promo shots from Madonna's albums and songs going way back, any of her photo shoots, including the cover for True Blue and that album, you'll see an exact imitation of Marilyn Monroe and her poses. So that is, that being said, let's chat about Marilyn Monroe and how she's literally influenced so many people and what a genius she actually was. People just don't give her enough credit for being the genius that she actually was. And as well, I'm kind of doing this on light of the movie that was out called Blondie there recently. It was absolutely, I mean, the cinematography of the movie was pretty good. It was, it definitely captured you in. It was, yeah, I mean, if you didn't know anything about Marilyn Monroe, that's exactly all you would know, is that story that was portrayed. And it's such a false story. I mean, it just portrays her to be this absolute victim, this weak, feeble woman that just had no control over her life, someone that just didn't seem to know any better, and that had been, just been taken advantage of right, left and center. And that is just not true. Marilyn Monroe, let me tell you, okay, let me dive in. I have my notes on my phone, so I'm going to be reading some of the notes from here. So to kick it off, let's talk about how new DNA evidence proves beyond doubt, listen to this, that Marilyn Monroe had Scottish roots. Who the hell would have guessed that? I don't know. She was descended from the famous Monroe clan from Moray, despite the alternative spelling of her surname. Okay, so they spell Monroe here Munro, as opposed to her own way that she spells it. And so experts have even pinpointed the small village where her forefathers came from. Now, I'm going to get this wrong. Eden Killilly near Forres. I don't know. Okay, yes, I'm Irish and I'm in Ireland. Scotland is quite different, their language. I mean, there is Gaeilge, which is the Irish language, but Scottish is quite different. So Hollywood star Marilyn Monroe's family tree has been traced back more than 1,000 years in Ireland, a DNA study has revealed. It was originally thought that the popular US icon descended from the Scottish Highlands, people of Clan Monroe, who took their name from a group of mercenary soldiers based near the River Roe in Derry, Northern Ireland. However, new research conducted as part of the Monroe DNA project has traced the clan's origins back to the southwest region of Ireland. This means that the Some Like a Hot Star may have family connections living in Kerry and in Cork. Now, I did do these notes a while back. I mean, I had intended on recording this podcast, probably about 6 months ago. So these notes are, so I'd actually forgot about that. Yeah. And I'm in Cork, and I'm from Cork. I'm a Corkonian, as they say. So, and Moore is my surname, although it's my mother's name, and they're Dublin. Clarkin is my father's name, and then Fitzsimons is what I grew up as, because I grew up with my grandparents. Well, actually, it was my grandmother and her husband, because she actually divorced her husband, which would be my grandfather, Clarkin, way back when, probably, I think it was the 60s or 70s. Or I think, the 70s, she divorced him and then remarried a man 20 years younger, would you mind? And they were Fitzsimons. So my parents were really young when I was born, so I literally grew up with my grandmother and her husband as mum and dad. So I grew up as Fitzsimons. Now that is not Norwegian. It is what is it? Oh God, it's after escaping my brain, but it's pretty much Irish. Fitzsimons, Moore is Irish, although I always kind of think Moore is more English. Clarkin is, I would say, sounds more English to me as well. But I mean, all my roots are in Ireland, 100%. And I actually did a DNA test as well, because everyone says, oh, but you look Spanish or you look Italian, and oh, your name is Antonia, you must have some Italian or Spanish. I'm like, no. I actually know where my family came from. I know who they are, and trust me, we did not go off with any fucking Spanish Armada, bloody fucking Spanish sailors that came in to the country way back when, and there isn't any Italian or Spanish in my family. My mum just liked the name Antonia. My grandmother wanted to call me Rosebud. My mother stepped in saying it's Antonia, thank God. And so therefore, I was called Antonia. And I suppose at the end of the day too, like, I actually did a DNA sample that says that I'm actually 1 of 4% of the entire population of Ireland that is 100% Irish. I'm 1 of 4% of the entire population of Ireland that's 100% Irish. I think I got that right the first time. But anyway, the fact of the matter is that clearly Norma Jean had notions, before she decided to get into the industry that she did get into in the end. She knew what she was capable of. She saw that image that we all know. If you are a fan of Marilyn Monroe, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The image that was first taken of her when she was working in the aviation factory, I believe, in the wing, or the aircraft wing. And there was a photograph taken of her there, and then that they suggested to her that she should get into modeling, which then she did. And Marilyn Monroe didn't just get discovered, she literally clawed her way to where she got. So let me continue. Well, actually, no, before I do continue, I just want to mention something about like Irishness and So, like, original people from Ireland had blue eyes and dark hair, which I have both. The only thing is I am quite tall, I'm 5'10", so people are kind of, thinking that that's a bit strange for people from Ireland. But let me give you a fact. Red hair does not come from Ireland at all. Red hair is it comes from Norway. It's Norwegian. So people that are in Ireland that have red hair, they're not Irish, they're Norwegian. Maybe they are born in Ireland, maybe their family are Irish, but they're descendants of Norwegian people. Irish people, and like when you see people with kind of green eyes and mousy coloured hair, that is very much so Leinster, and that is very much so Viking. Whereas dark hair and blue eyes is south of Ireland, and even west of Ireland as well. So they are the true Irish people, the blue eyes and the dark hair. So yeah, just wanted to throw that in there for anybody, because I'm always questioned about it. It's quite annoying. Well, actually, do you know what's not kind of annoying? It's kind of flattering, because at least I can dive in there and kind of correct them and say, well, actually, no, I'm 100% Irish, and actually blue eyes and dark hair came from Ireland. Red hair is not from Ireland, and blah, blah, blah. And then it's kind of giving everybody a little bit of a lesson at the same time. So basically her connections are living in Cork and Kerry. Very interesting. So Monroe was one of the most enduring sex symbols in popular culture. Died at the age of 36 in 1962. According to the BCC, the DNA project took samples from Monroe's, as in like the Scottish clan Monroe, spelled M-U-N-R-O, living all over the world, which helped researchers put together a complex family tree. The 2016 project had used DNA samples provided by a male relative of Monroe's grandfather, Otis Elmore Monroe. It found a link to John Monroe, a soldier from the area around Tain, don't know where that is, who travelled to America, obviously that must be in Scotland, and then travelled to America in the mid-17th century. It is not known what point in time the Monroe changed to Monroe, so changed from M-U-N-R-O to M-O-N-R-O-E. So basically just like an E added. Or if there were any other variations of the surname down through the years. Further branches of the Monroes, as in the M-U-N-R-O-S, R-O-S, the Scottish clan, were also traced back to Ireland, including the forefathers of the Monroes of Fowlis, the chiefs of the clan. I don't know if I totally got that wrong, I'm pretty sure. So the origins of the name Monroe, has as in Munro, has puzzled historians for generations. Modern day clan chief Hector Monroe of Fowlis told the BBC, tradition has it that we were mercenary soldiers from near the River Roe in Derry, Northern Ireland, hence the name Monroe. Mac on Rothak, jeepers. Rothak, I don't know, Rockatha. I should bloody be able to pronounce this. I haven't done Irish since I was in primary school, which is quite a while. In Gaelic, okay, Rothaich, Rothak in Gaelic, okay, but it had proved impossible to verify. These findings change that with Monroe, nothing that all four lines. Hang on, sorry, what? These findings change that with Monroe, noting that all four lines from the Irish ancestor can be traced back to southwest Ireland, he said. Marilyn Monroe's roots can be traced back to Ireland more than 1,000 years ago. According to new DNA study, the star of someone like a Hot, the 7-year-old who died in 1962, aged 36, is known to be descendant of the Monroe clan of Scottish Highlands. New research gathered through the Monroe DNA Project has identified a member of the clan from 1,750 years ago, with living descendants, wow, and all of his ancestral lines can be traced back to southwest Ireland. So I'm in southwest Ireland. Hector, well, actually, I'm in South Ireland. I'm in the city of Cork, but I'm from the east, actually, and East Cork. West Cork so West Cork, that would probably be better, right? Because a lot of clans would have been in West Cork at the time, rather than, staying in the city, let's say, or even East Cork, because in West Cork is beautiful, it's mountainous, and then it goes into Kerry, which I'd already said there that like some of our ancestors could be in Kerry as well as Cork, and it's more of a place where you would have, because it's beautiful there. There's a lot of waterfalls, beaches, rivers, lakes, streams, tributaries, forests, mountains. Whether in East Cork, there's a lot of beaches. It's also on the coast, and because Cork is the most southerly county in Ireland, for those that are listening that don't know that. And it's also the biggest county in Ireland. There are 32 counties in Ireland, if you were in the States and you're listening to this and you weren't aware. There is, someone said to me before, and I was like, oh my God, actually, you're not wrong. East Cork is quite flat. As in, like, there's no mountains. There's loads of beaches, but there's no mountains per se. It does have some beautiful forests and all of that, but anywho, I digress. Film director John Huston and playwright Arthur Miller, husband of Marilyn Monroe, paid a visit to Cork. It says here yesterday, so obviously they didn't arrive in Cork yesterday, but this was an extract from an article in a newspaper from a number of years ago. So John Huston and playwright Arthur Miller, I'm going to say yesterday anyway because it sounds good, husband of Marilyn Monroe, paid a visit to Cork yesterday to see the Epstein collection of Mr. and Mrs. Robert Jackson of Blackrock Castle. Blackrock Castle isn't actually far from here at all. It's only about it's walkable distance. And actually I knew somebody who got the Blackrock Castle for their 21st birthday. They're property developers. Now he'd be in his 50s, I think, but he got it for his son as an investment to turn it into maybe whatever, a restaurant, apartments, whatnot, because they are property developers and they went into business together as senior and junior, but and he sold it many years later. But anyway, it's now actually an observatory where they have an amazing telescope where you can actually have a look at the night sky. So it's very interesting. So Mr. Miller, who leaves by air from Dublin for the United States today, said, John told me about the Epstein collection at Blackrock Castle and I had to see it before I returned to the United States. Mr. Miller also said that he intended to bring his wife a present, and Mrs. Jackson, hearing this, handed him a souvenir of the castle, which was built in 1805. Then with Mr. Jackson, Mr. Huston and Mr. Miller toured the castle and studied the bronzes and collection of penciled nudes by the famous and controversial artist. Mr. Jackson, who staged the first representative exhibition of the works of Epstein in Dublin, said that Mr. Huston, who had previously visited the castle, phoned him on Monday night and asked if he could bring along a friend. Mr. Huston and Mr. Miller made the 120-mile journey by Rolls Royce in a rainstorm, and after a brief stop in Cork City, arrived in the afternoon. Mr. Hudson Mr. Houston, his back to a log fire, said that his leg, which was fractured as a result of a hunting accident, was now almost completely fit. He hoped to be out hunting again before the end of the season. Okay, so that was, as you can see, an extract from a reporter back in the day. So let's have a look what else I've got here. So playwright Arthur Miller became a poignant name in 20th century theatre, penning plays such as Death of a Salesman, All My Sons, and A View from the Bridge, to name just a few. He had built a sturdy career for himself in the theatre world, but it was his marriage to Marilyn Monroe which made him a household name. And when the two landed in Shannon Airport in 1956, it caused a sensation. So Shannon Airport would be in the west of Ireland, and it basically would be where many planes would stop. It's the first stop when you leave the United States. It's the first stop you get to in Ireland. You can also go into Dublin, you can also go into Cork, but Shannon is the first piece of land and the first airport that a plane will hit or see. Or come into view of when they get into Ireland. Otherwise, they fly over Ireland to Dublin. And it caused a sensation when they landed in Shannon Airport. Large swaths of autograph hunters swarmed into Shannon Airport on the night of November 20th. I should have a year for this. I obviously didn't write down a year, but anyway, you can Google it, I'm sure. Airport on the night of the 20th. Once word filtered through that Hollywood starlet Marilyn Monroe had landed with her husband Arthur Miller. The famous couple were not staying. It was merely a stopover to change planes on the way back to New York from England. In those days, transatlantic flights took up to and over 14 hours, so a compulsory stop at Shannon meant that famous names from all over the world spent some hours in the west of Ireland before continuing on their intended destinations. Airport security was unable to hold back the crowds, and they broke through, almost causing a near riot in the airport. Monroe was busying herself in the duty-free shop when the enthusiastic mob swarmed her. Some asked her for autographs, while others just wanted an up-close look at the glamorous star. People tried to source anything to get that all-important autograph, with some taking serviettes from tables for the Hollywood star to sign, while the more desperate resorted to nicking postcards from the stand in the shop. While Monroe was obliging her fans with autographs and small talk, her husband cursed and swore at airport security for letting such a mob assemble around his wife. Monroe was at the height of her fame at this time and was the most famous face on the planet, even for those in the west of Ireland, where TV was not yet available and censorship meant many films did not get released here. Miller was also enjoying a fruitful era in his career and had divorced his first wife in order to marry Marilyn Monroe just 5 months before their arrival at Shannon Airport. So that gives you a good indication of the timeline that this happened. I'm going to go read through all my notes and then I'm going to go into chat. Monroe and Miller eventually managed to get through the crowd and made it to the airport restaurant, where they were able to sit in comfort. Enjoy the silver service and indulge in Irish cuisine of steak and potatoes. Oh God. Although it is said that Monroe refused it, citing her skinny figure, which she prioritized over a decent dinner. The Hollywood starlet may have passed on the main course, but she didn't balk at the offer of Irish coffee. Of course, Irish coffee. Even I feel drunk after the first sip of Irish coffee. Whiskey, cream, coffee, I don't know what it is. Which was presented to her by the airport's exclusive chef, William Ryan. Miller was not to be outdone, and he too enjoyed an Irish coffee. Monroe added whipped cream to her beverage and quipped to Chef Ryan, "Is this the way it comes from the cows in Ireland?" Bless. Imagine if the cows produced automatic whipped cream. Jeez, I think we would have some commodity. The Irish coffee had been building a solid reputation for itself, but when Hollywood's most famous star was pictured taking a sip of it at Shannon Airport on that winter's night, here we go, in 1956 was the year, Monroe, perhaps unknowingly, automatically helped elevate it to more glamorous peaks. Monroe wanted to linger a little bit longer in the airport, especially at the duty-free shop, but her husband wasn't interested in funding a shopping spree for his wife, and he quickly moved on. The Irish coffee had been building a solid reputation for itself, but when Hollywood's most famous star was pictured taking a sip of it at Shannon Airport on that winter's night in 1956, Monroe perhaps unknowingly, automatically helped elevate it to more glamorous peaks. Although it was for only a few hours, this was to be Monroe's first and last time in Irish soil. Boo. Whereas her playwright husband would return 4 years later to stay with director John Huston in his Galway home to work on the screenplay for The Misfits, which would also turn out to be Monroe's last film before she died in 1962. Miller would go on to live a lot longer than his unfortunate second wife, dying in 2005 at age 89. Shannon Airport no longer plays host to these famous stopovers of yesteryear, but tales still abound, such as the night when Miller and Monroe were mobbed in duty-free 1 minute and relaxing with an Irish coffee the next. Yeah, it doesn't take 14 hours to go from the US to England or Ireland anymore. You can go from Cork to New York in probably 5 hours. So, all right, let's get into the nitty gritty. So basically, just to kind of talk about Marilyn Monroe, that was like something interesting that I had come across, and because I was wondering, is there any connection to Cork? And of course there is. Not even Cork, but Ireland, and Cork is just a bonus. So basically, Marilyn Monroe's heritage is she's actually got like descendants living right now in Cork and Kerry. So if you're from Cork and Kerry, maybe check it out. Maybe get onto the DNA people and find out whether or not you could be related to Marilyn Monroe. So, okay, let me dive into a few theories of mine. So, let me talk about Marilyn Monroe just in general and her beauty and her brains, because she was no bimbo, and that is for certain. Marilyn Monroe literally was one of the smartest people in Hollywood. She was the second only ever woman to set up her own production company. Well, not ever, but like at the time. A lot of women do that now, and a lot of women go into being directors and producers and whatnot. But at the time, she's only the second woman to actually set up her own production company, Marilyn Monroe Productions. And when she saw her star rise, Marilyn Monroe absolutely called the shots. It was Marilyn Monroe's way or the highway, literally. She was able to get, work with only very specific actors, directors, actresses, studios, producers. She actually delivered to the studio a list of who she will and will not work with. And she would only work with a certain amount of people and a certain few people, and so therefore that's all she did. And she also insisted on getting paid extra, which she did. So Marilyn Monroe was no pushover, contrary to what is put out there in the media and on TV and everything else. Marilyn Monroe was far from a pushover. Marilyn Monroe literally got her way or did nothing at all, and we know this to be a famous trait of hers, like where she would be late to studio, or she'd be late out of her trailer, late out of her dressing room, late to set, and pretty much a lot of that is because of she didn't want to come out until she got her part right, until she felt confident to hop in front of the camera and nail it. She basically literally, she was the person that literally just ruled the roost when it came to Hollywood once her star rose, but she absolutely scraped and clawed and climbed her way there. And she didn't take no for an answer. She had grit, she had determination, she had balls, she had her beauty behind her as well. But she went to every single event, she went everywhere and did everything right to be able to get herself known, recognized, and familiar amongst all of the Hollywood elite of the producers, directors, studios, etc. She worked PR absolutely geniusly as well. She had a PR person that was on her right hand side at all times and would promote her and do all of the PR for her to what Monroe wanted. Marilyn Monroe also controlled all of her images. If there was a photo shoot that was done, Marilyn Monroe would literally get all of the prints and she would X all of the images that she didn't want published. And so she literally controlled her image down to like a photographic image, to a still. So she developed her character from Norma Jean to Marilyn Monroe absolutely quintessentially geniusly. She had plastic surgery in her nose and her chin, and then with the right makeup artist and with bleaching her hair, she absolutely came out. she created that character of Marilyn Monroe. Deep down, we all know that yes, she was Norma Jean, but quintessentially, she became and developed that character, Marilyn Monroe, which I'm sure so many women now wouldn't be able to do. Madonna has emulated Marilyn Monroe. You have Anna Nicole Smith that has emulated Marilyn Monroe. A lot of other big celebrities have emulated Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe herself emulated her hero in Hollywood. Can't remember her name now. I do know it, but it's not coming to me. So Marilyn Monroe didn't just, get her idea for her image and her looks out of the blue. She had cultivated it from, watching starlets back in the day that were also blonde bombshells, and literally then just became the next level blonde bombshell. And then of course too, it was around the time that Technicolor TV was coming into play, so she just looked even better, and she did have an aura. Everybody says, everybody that you listen to or read interviews on, they all said that she had an aura, a quintessential light emanating from her. And she basically also used to say that she would just be in the orphanage every night and she'd be staring out at the water tank of Warner Brothers studio, and she would see the starlets and things like that, and she would see the lights flashing of premieres and whatnot happening in Hollywood, and she would dream of being an actress. And she was saying that the reason why her dream came true is because she dreamed the hardest. So basically you can imagine this little girl just manifesting her dreams of becoming the most beautiful, the most loved, the most adored, all of this icon, back in the day. She just dreamed of becoming this, and lo and behold, she did. So my theory in her pregnancies as well. So in a couple of her biographies, I think it's only mentioned once. It's not in a couple. I think it's in one biography or whatever like that. She admits that she was actually a little bit too selfish to maybe actually have her own kids. Now, I think that it was part of her character that she developed and created, part of the narrative that she, stitched into that character to be like, oh, all I want to do is have a family and have a baby and da-da-da. I don't believe that actually for a second, because Marilyn Monroe, first of all, not only do you need brains, grit and determination to get to where she got, but you also need you need to be a serious narcissist, and you need to be seriously selfish as well on top of it all. And she admittedly was quite selfish. And yes, she adorned and loved all of her stepkids that Arthur Miller had, that Joe DiMaggio had, that whoever else that she was living with had Milton Green. They all had children, and she would give them attention and give them love and play with them and give them spoil them with toys and purchases. But at the end of the day, she can walk away. When she decided she wanted to go back to Hollywood to make a movie, she'd be gone back to Hollywood to make a movie. She could be available on the phone for them at times if they decided to ring her, but she can, go through a segment of her life going, okay, I want the family thing now, so I want to relax and enjoy other people's children and oh, I'd love a kid of my own, and then, but she could easily walk away from that at any time, which she did. And also as well, the times where Marilyn Monroe was pregnant, she was working 14-hour days, dancing. She was, creating these outrageous arguments with her husband, Arthur Miller, causing stress and anger and anxiety in her body. She was taking uppers, downers, all sorts of drugs, medications. She was drinking quite heavily, and she was smoking. So if she genuinely wanted to have a child, why the hell was she doing any of those things? I mean, even back then you did know and you were aware that, drinking, smoking while pregnant, all of that, wasn't particularly healthy. Maybe not smoking, I think that was kind of deemed okay, believe it or not. But stress, anxiety, dancing, working 14 hours, drinking, everybody did know at that time that was not the healthy thing to do if you're going to be having a child. So if she did really want to have the child, she would have gone, right, okay, because Marilyn Monroe absolutely did 100% call the shots with the studios, with her movies and whatever she wanted to do once her star rose. So she would have just said, look, listen, I'm pregnant, I can't do these 14-hour days on my feet, I can't do all these dance routines, so put me into something that is not going to create as much stress on my body and my system. And then when she would get home, she'd probably go to bed, but instead she would get into a roaring argument drink shitloads of alcohol, booze, whatever. I don't know what she was drinking. Champagne, a lot of it, mostly champagne, probably bourbon and whiskey and all sorts. Smoked then as well on top of it. So, is that really a woman that wants a child? I don't think so. As I think that at the end of the day, with the kids that she was a stepmother to, she can just walk away and be like, all right, okay, see you later, guys, stay in touch, blah, blah, blah. With your own kid, you can't do that. You have to have the kid with you at all times. And I think that she just thought it was going to, ruin her figure, impede on her career. I think that she kind of thought to herself like that, this wasn't something that she wanted to be responsible for at the end of the day either. So I think that the fact that, she, there's like this myth or story going around of her narrative that like, all she wanted to do was have children and she was so unfortunate to have so many miscarriages. She brought on the miscarriages herself. I mean, she had something like 20 abortions, So, I mean, genuinely, I think was literally something ridiculous like 13 or 16 abortions, like, I had the figure. I didn't actually put it down in my notes. Probably should have done that. But anyway, when I was reading her documentary, when I was watching her documentary, but also reading her biographies, I've read several of her biographies, and I've been a fan of hers since forever anyway. So I've always been kind of like dipping in and out of things about her. But more recently, again, I just devoured 2 of her books. And after watching the Blonde movie, because I thought that was just an absolutely horrific portrayal of her. But yeah, so she had like, say, 13 minimum abortions. What does she expect? So you cannot tell me that that is a woman. And then when she was pregnant, she was drinking, smoking, dancing, working 14 hours and getting into crazy arguments and taking drugs. Cannot tell me that is a woman that genuinely actually wants a child. No, she was too selfish and she didn't want it to affect her movie making roles. That's a fact. So that's a narrative that I think that should be erased, because she didn't actually really want a kid. She said she did, but she actually didn't. And so my theory as well on her mental health. So back in the day, so Marilyn Monroe was born in 1926. So Marilyn Monroe's mother grew up in the 1900s, and so therefore Marilyn Monroe's grandmother would have grown up in the 1800s, right? Maybe 1880s, 1890s, whatever. Back then, it was your duty as a woman to feed your husband and look after the kids, and that's all you did. And if you stepped out of line, then you were sent into a mental institution. Literally, if you said, I'm not making dinner tonight, you'd be sent into a mental institution. If you had a child out of wedlock, you'd be sent into a mental institution. Any of these things, you'd be, you'd just be put away. It's absolutely insane, crazy. And then for when you're in the mental institution, you'd be getting electric shock treatment to the brain, frying your brain essentially. You'd be on heavy medication like lithium and God knows whatever else. So therefore that would literally drive you to insanity. Not only that, but just even the very fact of being locked up and having no freedom, no say, nothing would drive anybody crazy when they don't feel that they should be there, when they're actually perfectly safe. They just didn't want to do things another person's way, So then her mother, again, thinking that, her mother was in mental institutions, probably going to be inevitable for her as well, had postpartum depression from having Marilyn Monroe, and that was something that was not diagnosed at that time. All she probably needed was a little bit of, a therapist, to talk to once a week, probably just, a little bit of medication, and she would have been fine, a little bit of assistance. But no, she was just said that she was mental, and she's put into a mental institution, given tons of drugs, and went mental. Therefore, Marilyn Monroe thought she was going to have the same faith, but if only someone told Marilyn Monroe that, no, they weren't mental, they were made mental, you're fine, she would have been okay too. But if you're told you're going to be mental over and over and over and over and over again, then you're going to think that, fuck, actually, do you know what, it's going to happen to me too. Because DNA can change. You don't necessarily have to follow in the footsteps of, what happened down your gene line. It's nothing necessarily has to be hereditary. You can change, all of that, like things like dementia, things like mental illness. You can, just because your parents or whatever ancestors have had that, does not mean that you necessarily will have that too. And if you do, then you can change that. But if you're told all the time, and you tell yourself all the time, I'm going to end up like my mother, I'm going to end up like my mother, she's mental, she's mental, she's mental, then that will inevitably happen. I mean, clearly Marilyn Monroe was an amazing manifester, because she manifested herself into being a starlet from a very young age, looking out at the window of her orphanage, wanting to be an icon and beautiful and adored and all of that, So she told herself that she was going to be that, and she was. And then if you keep telling yourself you're going to be mental, then you will. But also as well, I mean, it would be, working in a studio, when you're doing a movie, you're working maybe say for 6 to 9 months, maybe even 12 months, like rigorously. You're constantly on call. You're up like at 6 or 5 o'clock in the morning for makeup, and then you mightn't actually get on set until like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Then you might be working until like 2 o'clock in the morning. It is crazy. Therefore, back in the day, actors were, I think that like they've kind of changed a little bit, like, where it's not that crazy, although it can be. And then you got to do take after take after take after take. So the fact of the matter is that like back in the day, they were given uppers and downers and sleeping pills and all sorts of things, and that was deemed fine. If the doctor prescribed it, then it was good. It just goes to show that like how little educated the doctors actually were, and they still are today. Doctors today just kind of go, right, okay, this is like medical, technical, chemical, perfect, give them that. No, our bodies are not chemical, our bodies are mental, in the sense that you can actually mentally heal yourself, but they don't tell you that. No. Anywho, so Marilyn Monroe was given, uppers in the morning, so it was basically speed. So she was given speed all day, and then she was given a sleeping pill at night. And that over and over and over and over again, obviously, clearly. And she was given all sorts of things like, for depression, for this, for that, for the other, that would just really wreak havoc and wreck you, and just wreak havoc on your system, full stop. That then combined with alcohol, copious amounts of alcohol. She was a little bit of an alcoholic. She would have champagne every day, pretty much nearly all day throughout the day. That combined with, of course, her medication on sleeping pills and whatever else would just put her into a different state of mind completely. Therefore, she would, then act out, because you would have all of this combination of, drugs in the system that would just obviously clearly be giving you like, crazy mood swings, maybe delirious thoughts. It would just drive you absolutely insane. It is just not healthy at all, no matter what. So at the end of the day, Marilyn Monroe was driven to depression and anxiety, because drugs like that make you depressed, because you're not getting natural sleep, you're not eating the right foods, you're drinking alcohol all the time. So my theory on mental health is that like she didn't have anything wrong with her mental health whatsoever. Neither did her mother. As I mentioned, her mother was like just postpartum, and back in the day, if you were any bit radical, therefore you would be just deemed fucking insane, which is nuts in itself. So Marilyn Monroe as well, like she absolutely, besides developing her character, she completely manipulated PR, which I've mentioned as well. So that was something that I think that was just genius of Marilyn Monroe. Kind of like, I suppose, like Kim Kardashian today as well, like how they stage all of their the paparazzi, or should like, paparazzi in quotes. All of that is completely staged. They just like are a PR machine. Marilyn Monroe was pretty much like a PR machine as well back in her day. And for someone that like, paved the way for so many people, and for someone that literally was the first of her kind and the first of her, for sure, her generation, to literally, not just be all beauty and brains, but like to have like the determination, the drive, the skill set, the everything that like you could possibly, have to get you to where you are. There's no denying that, like, and not to mention the fact that she was an absolutely amazing actress. All of her comedic timing, her performances. She was she was an extremely good actress. She was a one of the best actresses, I think, that there ever was. And I went to acting school in London, in the Met Film School in Ealing Studios. And I remember like when we were all kind of sitting around, and one of our tutors was there, and he was kind of going around the class going like, who are your favorite actors and actresses? And everyone was trying to be impressive, like by mentioning some obscure actor that was a theatre performer or something, back in the day, Shakespearean or whatnot. And I just went simply Marilyn Monroe and Elizabeth Taylor. And he went, wow, actually, do you know what? Yes, Marilyn Monroe, oh, she was amazing. And I remember a couple of people in the class kind of looked at me kind of going, what, really? You know, but you don't have to fucking, I mean, impress with some bullshit. I mean, she was an amazing actress, and she had excellent timing, excellent screen presence, which got her to where she went, where she ended up, like, you know, being an amazing famous film star. And yeah, so you know, I just want to change the narrative of Marilyn Monroe and have her be known as a genius. I want her to be known as a hugely talented success story. I want her to be known as a shrewd businesswoman and someone who played the game better than any other actress that I've ever come across in Hollywood. So there we have it. Hopefully you found that insightful and interesting. I just wanted to kind of do it on Marilyn Monroe because of the shit narrative that the new movie Blonde or Blondie, whatever it's called, like, you know, has put out there of her being a victim and her having this and having that. Bullshit. It's bullshit. It's the narrative that the press have created. You know, it's their storyline. It's not hers. It's the press. It's the reporters. It's the media's storyline of her that makes her to be the victim and makes her out to, you know, be this woman that just all she wanted was a family and never got it. This sad, broken creature. That is not true. She was not that. She was shrewd. She was a genius, and she was talented, and she was no fucking victim. She got her way or the fucking highway, and that was it. Literally, just to reiterate again, like, that woman, she was a powerhouse. So anyway, there we have it. Feel free to reach out if you're watching this on YouTube, leave comments below, and if you're listening to this on the podcast, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at Antonia K. Moore. Thank you so much, and ciao for now.